Canada Post is on strike. By now, we should all be aware of this. Everyone is being screwed over one way or another. Gifts that you're sending your loved ones, mail, maybe things that you've ordered. Who knows? It's an absolute shit show. And to add to the shit show, to make it the shittiest of all shows right before the holidays, you have a couple of other postal services. UPS and Purelator are now not looking so good. They have paused all new courier services. So if you've already shipped something with Purelator or UPS, it shouldn't be affected. But if you are planning on shipping something with Purelator or UPS, or ordering something that is going to be shipped with those, then yeah, you might not get what it is that you want. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage y'all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. We have to talk about the urgency of this postal strike. Now, when this happened, I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, get the fuck back to work. This is right before the holidays. What the hell are you doing? But as time has gone on, you hear more and more about the fact that Canada Post actually wants to get rid of as many full-time employees, which would cut benefits, which would cut your pay, which would cut the obligations that the corporation has to giving the employee literally anything. And they want to just hire a bunch, as many people as possible on temporary work, 8 hours a week. Temporary. That seems kind of messed up. So we're going to be taking a look at quite a few things, developments, ongoing disputes, how it's branched off to now UPS and Purelator's problem, and then some testimonies. And then we're going to wrap things up with some of the latest question period highlights. So buckle up, and I hope you stick around for the full video. Let's get right into it. All right, now we're going to shift things into some breaking news. So Canada Post is on strike. Canada Post is on strike. And hey, look at this. Hold on a second. A lot of people that have purchased stickers recently go, where's the stickers? Where's the stickers? Folks, they're all right here. I got all of the latest orders ready to go. I can't ship them. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to sit in a mailbox, for crying out loud. So I apologize. But if you'd like to purchase a sticker that sits in the mailbox or here in my hands until the strike is done, then feel free to click the link down below in the description and use code Sunshine for 15% off a sticker pack. But Canada Post is not the only strike that we have to worry about. Purelator and UPS is now freezing all new courier shipments to Canada because of the Canada Post strike. Are they joining the strike? Is it because they're overwhelmed with the influx of shipments? Let's watch this video. But it's getting crazy out there, folks.
Chantal Laverne likes to stay in the lines when it comes to her coloring designs, but the latest development in Canada Post's strike has made things messy.
It feels like we get ambushed. Like small businesses, it's like we always have to be like problem solving.
The Ontario business owner was heavily relying on UPS for the first 3 weeks of the strike, but now she's been notified it won't take her shipments either.
I'm building a business, so I can't start pulling back products. So yeah, it's been pretty hard.
UPS and Purelator are so swamped with deliveries, they've halted some shipments this week to try and catch up. FedEx is delaying unscheduled pickups until next week. They're blaming recent bad weather and the ongoing strike for the backlog. The companies say they now have to prioritize critical shipments. To do that, they're not accepting parcels from third-party platforms, basically middlemen couriers, and that's affecting online businesses across Canada. So say you bought a holiday gift from a small online business. Normally, it might need a smaller courier to get it to UPS, for example, which would deliver it to your home. But now, UPS is not accepting that initial delivery, meaning your parcel isn't going anywhere.
Unfortunately, the strikers are probably going to pay the price because I'm not going to go back.
It sucks for me because what am I supposed to do? Because a lot of my shipments are just held up. With Canada Post, I can't get them back. Now we have to refund customers.
When suddenly that volume is increasing more than they were comfortable with absorbing, then they're just going to press pause.
These other carriers can't handle what we handled.
The union says this is only proof postal workers perform a vital service.
We have an ability to get to places that other carriers don't, and we have infrastructure that gets it there.
Canada Post, which owns Purelator, responded Friday to the union's latest proposal. The two parties are not negotiating at the table, rather through a federal mediator. And the union tells us it and Canada Post are still pretty far apart.
So Sam, if someone's trying to order something in time for the holidays, what does all of this mean?
Well, those small businesses, they're trying to hit those holiday deadlines for Canadians who are ordering things online. So for some, that means working with other companies to hook them up with smaller couriers to fill that gap, which in some places it's cheaper. But in other places, that means canceled deliveries because those smaller couriers won't deliver to everywhere, including rural or remote locations. And now keep in mind, even if Canada Post and the union come to an agreement soon, that backlog could last for weeks.
Sam Sampson in Edmonton tonight.
Yeah, I think all of this is going to have massive backlash on all of the courier outlets, right? And I don't think anyone has ever said we don't need postal workers. They're saying it's a vital service. No one's ever debated that. What the hell's going on? It's the most wonderful time of the year. And please, for crying out loud, deliver the fucking packages. Like, what is going on here, folks? Come on. Well, that's what's going on outside of Canada Post. Now let's take a look at what's actually happening in Canada Post, because there is an update. Here we go.
Still no end in sight, at the strike at Canada Post, as the job action is into its fourth week. 55,000 postal workers walked off the job last month, bringing mail service to a halt across the country. Wages, weekend delivery, and job security are some of the key issues in the dispute. Federal mediation was put on hold last week due to the union and the Crown Corporation being too far apart and has yet to fully resume. Canada Post, meanwhile, has released a statement which reads in part, Canada Post is surprised by public comments made by CUPW regarding our counter-proposal, as we have made significant moves to close the gap on key issues like weekend delivery, pensions, and wages, and bring much-needed urgency to the discussions. It goes on to say Canada Post has continued to put forward fair offers that are focused on our customers and our employees, improving service to grow our parcel business while protecting and enhancing what our employees have today. So for the very latest in reaction on this labor dispute, we're joined now by Mark Lubinsky, president of the Toronto local of CUPW. Good to have you today, sir. Thanks for taking the time.
Good afternoon, Lindsay.
So a lot to kind of unpack there from that latest statement from Canada Post, but what do you make of the part near the beginning where it said it's surprised that the union is making public comments?
Well, they didn't. The statement that you had there was regarding the public comments regarding the negativity of the counter offer that was given. Right now, the mediator has stepped aside, but he's still passing on offers from both parties. The last comment I heard was that they were actually going backwards. That Canada Post is going backwards, and it's a worse offer than before, and they're creating more part-time jobs in that offer. I'm not surprised. I've seen how Canada Post has acted. Their spokesperson has put the blame on the workers. He's talked about losses, but all these losses are a responsibility of the board of directors of Canada Post, of the minister, Duclos. They're responsible for these losses for 5 years. They made strategic investments. They built plants. They invested $500 million in a new plant. Now, all we need to do is go back to work. We need to have a fair offer to protect ourselves from cost of living, to have the same standards we had 3 years ago, be able to afford the groceries in the store, be able to afford living in Toronto. So that's all we're asking as members, and we're very shocked. But this behavior of Canada Post is no different. We've been negotiating for over a year. We've been on the picket line for 3 weeks. You know, if this was resolved before a strike, there would have been no issue, and we were forced to go on strike. They changed our working conditions. They took away our benefits. Now they're actually laying off workers on strike. We're perplexed. It's just intimidation for the workers.
Yeah. That part right there has gotta be illegal. There's no way you can fire employees that are unionized on a strike. That's crazy. I don't agree with the strike happening right now during Christmas, but firing Canada Post employees that are on strike, what? Come on, man. That's gotta be crazy. Unless I'm overlooking something, but I feel like that's gotta be illegal.
That are on the picket line. So I'm very disturbed, but I know this employer. I've dealt with them for 34 years. That's just how they are. The government, Minister Duclos, needs to be responsible. We need good jobs, like you said. for Canadians, but he needs to get that to his CEO to understand that and tell Doug Edinger and that board, respect Canadians, respect the workers. That's the realities.
And I do want to get a little bit more into, those demands you just mentioned and possibly some of the sticking points in negotiations. But just touching on this statement once more, because there was one more question I had from this. The Canada Post said that we have not yet received a formal response from CUP W through the mediators, I'm assuming, to the latest offer. Has the union now formally responded?
I'm not privy to that information. I was updated yesterday. You gave me a further update from Canada Post today. But, they're in going back and forth. So has the union given a counter proposal to their last offer? I guess they didn't if Canada Post says they haven't. But the mediator hasn't started it up, mediation, but he is passing forward these counter offers from both parties. I know our union has modified our demands, and we also have moved on Canada Post demands to move forward. We want a negotiated contract at the bargaining table. We want to be back to work yesterday. But, we need a fair agreement. What Canada Post proposed initially in their global offer, they wanted us to take a cut of salary of 10% because there's a cost of living. We're all falling behind as workers. In Toronto, rent has gone up in the last 9 years. It's doubled. How can we afford to live? We need to be treated with respect. Workers in Canada Post, a crown corporation that's owned by the government, that uses no taxpayer money, that has used reserves to modernize our company. It's a public institution, so it's ours. So we just want respect and be able to live with dignity. And Canada Post, their executive board needs to understand we're workers, and the government needs to tell them what they tell us in public. They need to tell that board, treat us with respect. We're just workers, and we want a decent cost of living increase so we could survive, be the same place where we were 3 years ago.
Okay, we are just about out of time. I do want to ask you one more question, though. I appreciate, you already went through kind of the demands, the sticking points. I take your point that a lot of things have been taken away from Canada Post workers, like benefits, for example. But for customers who are kind of like...
I didn't know that. I didn't know that their benefits were taken away. Like, you may agree with the strike, you may not agree with the strike, but every worker in Canada has the deserve to be treated with dignity, like a human being. And it's starting to sound like these people are tossed to the side, right? Just for a failing postal service that's constantly running a deficit. Their benefits have been taken away. They have absolutely no benefits. And their costs or their wages are not keeping up with inflation, which is something that, to be honest, most Canadians can actually agree with. But it really feels like Canada Post is just absolutely throwing the employees into the gutter.
Like, okay, this is the third week of the strike. Things have been disrupted. What's your message to customers who are watching this back and forth between the union and Canada Post? You did say you wanted to get back to work yesterday. Are you hopeful that maybe a deal can be reached soon?
So one thing I just want to correct is we're fighting for new workers. A lot of these things, they are taken away from new workers. They want to create a part-time workforce that works 8 hours a week. We don't want a gigafied economy. We don't want gigafied
there it is.
Corporate workers. So that's where the major fight is. But regarding what to say to our customers, I empathize with you. I'm a customer also. I've even, Christmas, we lost 3 weeks of our wages, 6%. And I looked online too to buy something, but I'm not going to use no other carrier. I say we are fighting for the middle class, the regular workers. If we don't win our fight, we have the power, the right to go on strike. We're forced to go on strike by a crown corporation.
Yeah.
That says that we have the right to live with dignity. That's all we want.
I agree with that. I agree that Canada Post workers, all workers in Canada, have the right to live with dignity. And what's happening right now is not that. You have a corporation that is abusing its employees, using and abusing them, and then throwing them to the side. And this is something that you may be angry at, that Canada Post on strike. I'm angry, man. I've got a bunch of stickers. This is only part of the pile right here of all the people that have ordered stickers that I can't send, right? So people probably in this live chat right now watching this video or whatever, right? And it's very annoying. But there's going to come a time where you might feel like you're underpaid or your benefits get taken away. And all of a sudden, hey, are you going to go on strike? Yeah, you should. You should. If you have the ability to, and fight for what you deserve, what you believe you deserve, what it is that you deserve, then go ahead and do that, because we all know that massive corporations, they don't treat their employees correctly. It's a facade. It's a brochure, right? It looks good on paper, but when you actually are there, it's not very good. It's not nice. And that's what seems to be happening with Canada Post. So I could be mistaken. There could be parts of this that I'm not understanding, maybe things that I've overlooked. But I think that Canada Post employees, man, are treated very poorly. That's my opinion. I'd love to know yours. Now that you're fully caught up on everything postal happening here in Canada, it's time we take a look at some other important things, such as the debates that took place in the most recent question period. In case you missed it, here are the clips.
Mr. Speaker, after doubling the debt with inflationary spending, doubling the cost of housing with more bureaucracy that blocks building, doubling the number of people using food banks, with carbon taxes on farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Finally, they're planning a fall update, but they'll do it in the snow on December 16th. Our message is stop. Yes. Stop the inflationary spending. Stop the tax increases on food and homes. Stop indebting Canadians. Will they please just stop?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of December, we will present our economic record in this chamber, and we will talk about the fall economic statement. And I anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about the economic record that we've amassed. One thing that I anticipate you'll hear about is what we've done with respect to childcare. On childcare, an economic affordability model, we've brought it down to $10 a day in 8 provinces. That has resulted in 110,000 women joining the workplace. What is that record, Mr. Speaker? 85% of women are now participating in the workforce in Canada. That is a record high. That is what we stand behind on this side of the House.
Not on merit, but because of gender.
Mr. Speaker, what they've amassed is a lot of debt. In fact, they doubled the debt. This Prime Minister has added more debt than all prior Prime Ministers combined, which has caused the worst inflation in 40 years, inflation that is now rising as the debt is rising. Now, the Finance Minister said that she had a guardrail for the deficit. It would not go beyond $40 billion. If you go up to $40 billion, that means you've hit the guardrail. And if you go higher than $40 billion, you've gone through the guardrail. What's on the other side of a guardrail? A cliff. Yeah. Is this minister leading us off the cliff?
I mean, I'd say so.
Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's talk about the spending that our government is doing. Let's talk about what observers are observing. Tiff Macklem, I'm pretty sure he knows who that is. The governor of the Bank of Canada says we're no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against getting inflation down. We have already brought it down. Let's talk about David Dodge, the former Bank of Canada governor who was in place when that member was in cabinet. He said because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 to 2016, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower rather than a more muted recovery. We're not going to follow that playbook because it didn't work.
And ask colleagues to please not take the floor so that we can hear the answer to the question clearly. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, we have put forward a motion inspired by the leader of the NDP.
Yeah, use his own words.
He said that this Prime Minister is weak, is greedy, is selfish, and is beholden to corporate interests. He has pointed out that this Prime Minister has violated the rights of workers. So we took the NDP leader's words, we put it in a motion that includes non-confidence. Will the Prime Minister allow this NDP leader a free vote so that he can vote non-confidence?
Look at the enthusiasm. One party's alive, the other party's dead. The Bloc is standing up. The Conservatives are saying, come on.
See, that is stretching the limits, of course, of question dealing with
Shut up.
See that the Honourable Government House Leader is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing we know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition certainly doesn't allow any free votes for his members of Parliament. And what we also know is that he doesn't allow them to speak for themselves. What we do know is that when they put forward, try to advocate for their communities, what does he say? No, don't do that, because I don't think it's politically expedient for me. So what he does do is muzzle his own MPs, doesn't allow them to have free vote, and keeps them from standing up for their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Imagine this. A woman in her 70s,
He took his
she's
Rolex
worked her
off.
whole life, raised her kids, done everything right. Now she's retired and her pension doesn't go far enough and she's got to skip meals. The Prime Minister believes that someone earning $140,000 a year deserves a check of $250, but that she doesn't. Why?
Here, here, here.
He took his Rolex off to try to relate to people.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to stand by our record of defending seniors. On multiple occasions in this chamber over the last 9 years, we've done things like change the retirement age from 67, as proposed by the Harper Conservatives, back down to 65. We've made targeted investments to improve old age security for those over the age of 75. Most recently, we put in place a dental care plan for seniors that has had, despite assertions by the Conservatives that it doesn't even exist, 2 million people sign up and over 1 million people actually receive services for the first time in decades. That's a record of serving seniors and assisting seniors and meeting them where they are. We'll stand by that record.
Today, the NDP leader has a chance to prove that he didn't sell out Canadian workers for his own pension. Now, he famously promised Canadians that he ripped up his coalition with the Liberals, saying they, quote, were too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Now, Conservatives agree, and Canadians want a carbon tax election. So, will the Prime Minister allow the NDP leader to vote for his own words, or did the PM whip the NDP vote to block a carbon tax election?
Everyone's standing up, and so is Pierre. Pierre's looking over at the block on stand up.
I'm afraid that question doesn't, again, meet the relevance of the administration of government. I do see the government House leader rising to answer. Colleagues, a couple of things. One, let's just make sure that when someone has the floor, that no one else is taking the floor. And B, colleagues, I would hate for us to repeat what had gone on Friday. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you mentioned, there was actually no question for the government there, but if the member opposite wants to talk about pensions, he could talk about the pension of the leader of the opposition, who, because he's been here for 2 decades, is estimated at being about $2 million, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to talk about muzzling of members of parliament, he should probably pose the question to the leader of his own party, who doesn't like MPs that don't ask the questions that he wants them to ask. In fact, we see all of them around the outskirts of the Conservative area in this House of Commons.
If Pierre fixes Canada, give him a bigger pension. Give him a $5 million pension.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it looks like this Prime Minister has lost control of everything except his control over the NDP. Now, according to the NDP leader's own words, quote, "You're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of the workers. Never." Now, we've seen that this Prime Minister has done just that, ordering binding arbitration. But the question is, what has this Prime Minister promised to the NDP in exchange for their support for his failing government and his failed carbon tax?
Yep. And we have an opportunity to change that today.
Again,
you got mail.
That is not relevant to the administration of government or about and the chair will have something to say about this at the end of question period. But I do see that the honourable minister was rising on his feet. I don't know if he wants to continue to respond. I see no minister rising. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, every time that there's a ruling about the government on this issue, there's an absolutely material question, which is the Liberal or the NDP say one thing over and over again, and then come in and support the Liberals. So asking what the Liberals have promised the NDP in favor of their support after time and time again saying all of these things, they keep supporting the government. So what has the government promised the NDP to avoid a carbon tax election?
Yeah. So Fergus is going to try and delay the vote in non-confidence to say that the Conservative question was unfair, and now he muted the mic. Wow, there's more eyeballs watching today than any other day, and this was the same thing with the previous 2 votes in non-confidence. And this guy has the audacity to go
the end of question
and be a dictator.
Perhaps I wish I could have done it earlier, but I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on her feet to answer. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in response to that member's question that, as I think we all know, doesn't actually have to do with government business, but the member opposite, and in fact most of the Conservative caucus, know a thing or two about saying one thing and doing the opposite. They've been talking about cutting taxes, but at the first opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, they say no, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, standing up on behalf of their constituents, but when they try to do that, the Leader of the Opposition takes away their ability to pose questions in this place. Mr. Speaker, if they don't repeat the slogans ad nauseum of the Leader of the Opposition, they're simply not allowed to speak. They're pretty good at saying one thing and doing another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, this is messed up.
Nose Hill.
To be very clear, Speaker, the Leader of the NDP has gotten up and railed against the Liberals for the GST measures, against workers, every possible thing. The NDP has said the government is incompetent. They said they can't vote for him. Yet every time there's a confidence motion, the NDP stand up and do what? They vote for the government. So it is the business of this place. How much is it costing Canadians? What has this administration promised the NDP to get them to vote against their leader's own words?
Yeah. There is something seriously wrong with the House Speaker. He is abusing his power today of all days.
Once again, the Honourable Government House Leader is rising to her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member knows something about railing against a leader, but one question that she might want to ask the leader of her party is why he won't get a security clearance. I believe last week at...
What did she just say? Railing against a leader?
Leadership contestant about alleged interference by India in the Conservative leadership race, but the Leader of the Opposition refuses to get a security clearance to actually learn about what happened. Mr. Speaker, he should put the security interests of Canadians ahead of his own personal interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This Liberal NDP government created a fall fiscal fiasco as they failed to table their fall economic statement. After 9 years of inflationary deficits, adding more debt than every government before them combined, they have a lot to hide. Even the parliamentary budgeting officer said this feudal finance minister blew through her own fiscal guardrail of her $40 billion deficit. Why don't they just stop the economic arson, stop the tax hikes, stop the inflationary deficits, stop adding to the debt, and call a carbon tax election now?
Yep.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know
Wreck-It Ralph.
The only thing the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas dinner are stale slogans.
The only thing that the Conservatives are serving up for
Governor
Christmas
said at a Senate
dinner.
committee recently, government spending is not pushing up or pushing against us getting inflation down. The parliamentary budget officer also recently said the current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable. He also said we could spend up to 1.5% more of GDP. What's appalling is to understand how the Conservative Party of Canada won't step up to support a tax break with all their obsession about tax cuts.
Hey, anyone who's on the email list, check your emails. You've just been sent an email.
For Calgary,
it's important.
While the Liberals brag about turning temporary 2-month tax tricks like taking dimes off Doritos, common sense Conservatives will lax the tax for good because their carbon tax scam is driving more than 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 to skip meals. If they're so sure about quadrupling their carbon tax scam, why don't they just stop? Stop breaking the country further. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can choose between more tax tricks or a common-sense Conservative government that will bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks.
Hey. You can see why that's one of Pierre's right-hand man.
Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about tax tricks. What I think is interesting is tricking Canadians into thinking that they're actually serious about cutting taxes for Canadians when the first opportunity they get to stand up in this House and support Canadians who they know well have been struggling through an inflationary period. And they won't. They stand up against, they oppose the very tax cuts that they campaigned on. A GST holiday for Canadians on essentials over the next 2 months is a good thing. I don't know how they can deny the support that Canadians deserve.
The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last year the finance minister said that the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And now Parliament's still waiting for the public accounts to confirm whether the minister kept that promise. Can the minister spare us the suspense and tell us what the deficit was for last year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stuck to our
government
and that's exactly why inflation has come down for 11 months in a row, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 11 months in a row. We were the first in the G7 to cut interest rates, and we've had 4 consecutive rate cuts. And we're looking forward to this Wednesday with the Bank of Canada. We'll have another meeting and looking forward to their announcement. Thank you.
Fucking Wreck-It Ralph. What a dumbass.
Colleagues, especially the honourable member from Abbotsford, please do not speak unless recognized by the Speaker. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of making promises that you don't intend to try or even keep? In 2020, the finance minister said that when the need for stimulus was over, it would be withdrawn. They didn't withdraw it. Then it was that the debt to GDP ratio would continue going down, except 1 year later, it went up. And then she said the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And lo and behold, we find out she's broke that promise too. So when will someone at least admit that these folks are committing economic vandalism and tell us what the deficit is, or are they just worried that it's going to shred all the credibility that she has left?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Our government will stack up and compare our record to the Conservatives and run on that any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable members to please not take and have conversations over those, especially those who are using devices to be able to listen to the proceedings of the House. The honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
From the top. Our government will stack up and run on our record, our fiscal and economic record against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I'm happy.
Colleagues, the more time that the Speaker has to spend on his feet, the fewer questions we have to get through in question periods. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will run on our record on economic policy against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sundays. We have
and twice on Sundays.
The lowest deficit, the lowest
freaking Neanderthal
GDP ratio. We have seen that the Stats Canada has revised the forecast for Canada for the last 3 years up, which is significant. And we're also rated by the IMF to have the strongest GDP growth in the G7. I think that economic record stands for itself, Mr. Speaker.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.